Welcome, everybody. This is Nancy Phillips, and I coordinate the Illinois Family Resource Center. The Resource Center started April 1 of 2015, and the last few years have just been incredible with what's happened and the interest that's popped out of that. As I looked at the list of people registered, there are so many new people that are coming from areas that don't normally sign into our webinars, and I find that exciting because it's just more opportunity to pass the word along about what we need to be doing in the state of Illinois to help our families and our children and our littles manage this crazy world that we live in sometimes. And I come from that crazy world, so I understand it. What I want to do is just tell you real briefly what we do as the Resource Center. Our goal is to provide information and support around substance use disorder, mental health, gambling, all those co-occurring issues that create chaos in our lives and in our families and in our communities. And we are a resource center, but we do it in lots of different ways. My background is from treatment. I've worked at the state level with prevention and done a lot of training over the years. I've been in this field over 40 years. But I've also been certified as an addictions counselor, as a family professional to work through the certification board to work with families. So that's where my real passion is, and especially when it comes to the kiddies. But we provide information for human service workers, not just people working in the substance use disorder field, for parents, significant others, the Ross councils throughout Illinois. I've been very involved in that over the last 6 years as those have grown and really started supporting our communities. And we do this through a variety of methods. We have a website, so there's postings there. You can, if we can keep up with it, you can actually sign on to the links that put you into the webinars. We do monthly webinars, and now we're doing pretty much so 2, and even some months 3 webinars. We have a Facebook page. The webinars, we're starting to provide some in Spanish, and that's with bringing on Christina Banda, who's I'm located in Charleston, Illinois. The Resource Center is a statewide program and project, but Christine is up in the Chicago area, which really helps because she has a background in teaching and knows the communities, and she is able to provide Spanish workshops and resources for us. And I find that exciting. It's time that we're looking at that. We can do technical assistance if you're trying to put together programs to give to your communities. We can help with actually training of new counselors. I do that on a regular basis locally. We do individualized in-service presentations. We can do that in person. We can do it with Zoom, so that we can take a topic that maybe we've done in a webinar and you go, oh, but I need this piece of it addressed a little bit more. We can do that. We do a number of conferences and exhibits throughout the year. Fall and spring are really big with that. We've got a huge one coming up. We'll be gone for 6 days with 2 exhibit tables, and while I'm there, I just happen to be doing a 3-hour workshop. We collaborate with a lot of other statewide efforts, such as CASA and Prevent Child Abuse, and Drug Endangered Children, the alliance there. Another one that many people probably don't think about is working with the Illinois Liquor Control Commission. Matter of fact, one of their people is going to be doing a webinar for us on how liquor is being marketed and placed in our communities to impact our children. And I find that really exciting. I really like working with them. And just research information, do a lot of stuff with kinship care. I am one of those people that's been the kinship caregiver. And just knowing that our Spanish workshops are going to be available, you just have to get a hold of us and we'll do that. And I just wanted to let you know, if you weren't familiar with what we do and what some of that history is, what it's about. So I'm going to Just fill you in on a couple of other things really quick. We are funded by the Department of Human Services through the Substance Use Prevention and Recovery, known as SUPER, that division. We've done a lot of work with the National Association for Children of Addiction, which Jerry will talk more about and is definitely a part of, but we have looked at their programming and offered a lot of training. So hang in there, because we're probably going to do another go round and add to it this next year with a whole new topic. I want to let you know that we do have ICB as well as the professional register approved CEUs for the trainings, including this one. And those certificates, we have a lot of people in this, so we probably won't have those all out until March 1st. And you see Zach here. Zach's the administrative assistant, and I don't know what I'd do without him at this point. He will be sending those out. If anyone needs it before you get it, let me know, because sometimes people are right up against that deadline and need those CEUs. And we are recording. If you have any questions or any needs, please stick it in the chat. I'll be monitoring chat. Zach's going to be flipping the slides for Jerry. And if everybody's ready to go, I'm going to introduce you, Jerry.
Let's do it.
Okay, let's do it. Jerry is the Senior Clinical Advisor of the National Association for Children, and there's a new word in there, impacted by addiction, better known as NACOA. I have known who Jerry was for, well, since the 80s. So I'm really excited. I feel very honored that he's here, and he's just a really super nice guy. So you guys were going to enjoy this. He is the National Director of the Children's Program Emeritus. I never say that right, so I hope that's right. At the Hazelden Betty Ford. Oh, thank you, Jerry. And the experience he brings from that is just absolutely incredible. Jerry is an author, and he's a speaker, and he's a consultant on issues for children and families hurt and impacted by addiction, which is many of us that are sitting right here as we go through this next hour and a half. He spent over 4 decades, sounds a lot like me, working in the treatment and recovery worlds. And he's done over 24 books. And here is my favorite, which is Through a Child's Eyes, Understanding Addiction and Recovery. And that's a lot of what he's going to be sharing with us today. And then the Beamer series for kids. And Jerry's work has been featured in the PBS documentary, The Lost Childhood. And I'm very familiar with that. And if you haven't ever seen it, Google it, see if you can't find that and take a look at it. It's something that I used to work for Prevention First for a number of years, and we used that as a basis of a lot of the training we did, just baseline training on what substance use disorder is and the impact. And this was 20 years ago, 30 years ago. He's contributed to Emmy Award-winning programs on both Nickelodeon and Sesame Street. Keep that in mind, Sesame Street, this is just incredible. And I'll tell you right now, on June 13th, Jerry's coming back, and he's going to talk about his work with Sesame Street in a workshop called Sesame Street Parental Initiative, A New Look. And this is so exciting. So stay tuned. We'll make sure that you get the links for all of that. Jerry, have at it. It's yours.
Oh, thank you, Nancy. Well, welcome to all of you. You know, there's a big part of me right now that wishes we were in person with each other. I mean, I'm just way, way too old school, but just being in person. And yet I'll tell you, in the same breath, it was nice to sleep in my own bed last night and not be running crazy. But I sincerely hope that somewhere down the line we get to meet in person. That would be really wonderful for me. Thank you for taking the time this morning to do this. I know how busy each and every one of you is. And so just thank you for that. And even more importantly, just thanks for what you do and the difference you make in the lives of children and families. Nancy, what a joy to do this with you. All of your years of service, And I am always moved by your commitment and your dedication all these years and never losing a focus on children and families. So I applaud you. And Zach, thank you so much. What a difference that you're making. And lastly, just collaborating with the Illinois Family Resource Center. Uh, Powerful resource to serve families and communities. And the work that Nancy spoke about that you're doing with children and teenagers, celebrating families, a children's program kit. These are good evidence-based programs that truly can make a difference. And lastly, just how the center strengthens recovery-oriented systems of care is really important. And I know that's a statewide initiative going on in Illinois these days. So I got to start with a story, and then we'll get right into doing this. So I was doing a children's program, and I'll explain more uh, about the kind of programs, but we do this work over a number of days. And so this little girl shows up. She's about 10 years old, and she's got a jacket on. And most of that first day, hands in the jacket, and she's not talking, but you know what? We just loved her and cared for her, let her be. And she comes back the second day and just breaking the ice just a little bit more. And you know, kids grow at their own space and at their own time. And the third day of the program, she and her mom show up like 45 minutes early. And she goes, "Oh, she just wanted to get here." And, you know, and I knew why. She started to make friends. You know, starting to see that there were other boys and girls living with the same kind of challenges that she was living with. And I looked at her and said, "Okay, you have two options here. I'll let you pick. Do you want to sit in the lobby with your mom?" And that would be okay. "Or do you want to come with me? We'll go into the group room. I want to set up a couple of things for our day." And you know what? If you make that choice, wow, what a lucky guy I am to just get a few minutes with you. That would be sweet. Well, she comes with me, and I'm getting things ready for the day, and she's talking and asking, "What are we going to do?" And, you know, she's asking if some of the boys and girls will be back. Yes, they'll be back. And then all of a sudden she says, "Jerry," and I turn around and look right at her. And she says, "Could I ask you something?" I said, Of course. Of course you can ask him." So what I did, she was sitting in the circle. I got in the circle about quarter of the way around the group, so we had space. And I said, "You can ask me anything that you want." Well, she looks at me and says, "Where do you work?" And I go, "What?" And she goes, "Where do you work?" And I'm thinking, is this a ruse? Is she pulling my leg? You know, what's coming with this? And she saw me hesitate and she says, "Yeah, after you play with us all day, where do you go make money?" And she was concerned. And quite frankly, I was appreciative. But I looked at her and real spontaneously, I replied, "I don't have a job." At which point she nodded her head affirmatively and had a smile on her face and looked at me and said, "That's what I thought." So that's how we'll start out this morning in all of this. You know, my hope, and we'll get right into this, my hope is that we'll leave here at you know, less than 90 minutes now, and that you take uh, an insight or two, perhaps a different perspective on things, a couple of new strategies that you can use, and tools and techniques, because I'll never have enough tools and techniques. And so all of those things are incredibly important. We will make this PowerPoint available to all of you who want it. And let's get right into it. So Zach, next slide. Through a child's eyes, understanding addiction and recovery. Next slide. And so I want to put my comments in context. So for 23 years before I retired, I spent the last 23 years of my career at the Betty Ford Center. And it was a program, a children's program for 7 through 12-year-olds. And why that particular age group? Well, we were going to do programs over 4 consecutive days, about 25 hours, really wanting to build relationships with kids that have experienced a lot of trauma in their lives. I'd learned early in my career, seeing kids once a week for an hour, which is, you know, we're about to make breakthroughs and things were about to take place, and we'd run out of time. 7 to 12-year-olds, we wanted to get boys and girls before they took that first drink or that first drug. Because for some of us, it's that first drink and that first drug, and we're already off to the races in developing a substance use disorder. All of the kids had a family history of addiction, but notice, open to all kids. You didn't need to have somebody in treatment at BFC. And so our groups were so diverse. So we had kids, in fact, who did have a loved one in treatment. And maybe it was a sibling in an adolescent program, in treatment programs all over the place. But over half the boys and girls we served were living in families where substance use disorder was active. And who brought the kids? Well, their other parent or a grandparent, or as Nancy spoke to, a kinship family member, a foster family member. Wasn't unusual for a 19-year-old who had just gone through treatment, had some good recovery time behind him or her, and they would come and do the program with their younger siblings between the ages of 7 and 12. But I also want you to know that there were children who would attend whose parents were in recovery for 10 years or more, and the kids were 9 and 8. And the parents needed help. How do I tell the kids about what had gone on in my life and why my recovery lifestyle is so important in all of this? And so really they wanted that prevention focus. And the most important thing, and this was Mrs. Ford herself, this is our dear First Lady, who I miss to this day. No child was ever turned away due to an inability to pay. We took that whole thing right off the table so it wouldn't interfere with the process. Now, I have worked with younger kids, and we'll talk about them. I actually started early in my career doing some groups for 4 to 6-year-olds. And the work with Sesame Street brought me back to kids in that age group. And also with stuff I've done with Nickelodeon through the years with more teenagers and teenagers 13, 14, 15, 16. So we'll be able to give you some things I think that work across the board. And so let's start this way. Artwork is a powerful therapeutic tool to use with kids. Children often draw what they initially can't say, and they create a powerful visual. Now, the next day, if they're willing to share it with the group, strictly up to them. They don't have to. They can rip it up and throw it away, whatever they want to do. They get to choose. But if they share it with the group, all of a sudden, everybody's looking at these powerful visuals. And boys and girls can ask questions, make comments, identify with, relate to, have feelings about. But the key to all of this, I think kids of all ages who have been impacted by substance use disorder, the key is helping children be able to separate the person they love, whether this is mom, dad, brother, sister, grandma, grandpa, how to separate that person from the disease that goes like this. And notice here is this person, filled with beauty and goodness, but that insidious disease goes like this, and it obscures so many of those things. And I want to teach kids how to separate those two, how to separate the person and how to separate the disease. Because one of the things I learned really early in my career, didn't take long at all, and gosh, I had so much to learn and continue to do. I always want to be a learner with this stuff. Is that when I would ask a child, tell me about your mom's drinking. Tell me about dad's use of pain medication. Tell me about your sister who smokes marijuana every day. When I frame it that way, in essence, I'm asking boys and girls to betray and be disloyal to that person and the family. And so it would create, confusion and upset, sometimes anger, often guilt and shame. So I want to reframe that. Let's have kids talk about the disease because they will more readily talk about the disease. Let's talk about the disease that takes away the very people that we love. Let's talk about the disease that wreaks havoc on everyone in a family system and takes everybody hostage. And so I want to show you a series of pieces of art that kids have done through the years. But let me just set it up. So kids in a program all day long, we eat with kids, we play with kids, we do group, we hang out. And again, it's building trust, it's building relationship. That is the key to all of this. And by the way, kids don't care about how much you know until they know about how much you care. We got to bring our heart, we got to bring our soul to this work. And so that last hour of the day, we put some Native American flute music in the background, very, very soothing in all of this. And we ask kids, draw a picture of how addiction has hurt your family. What has this disease done to your family? And there could be that 12-and-a-half-year-old kid who never draws a picture, but who puts his or her head on the table and just cries. Getting to it and not necessarily even drawing. And then one of the counselors spending time, well, if you would have drawn a picture, what would it have looked like? How has addiction hurt your family? So Zach, let's do that. Let's show them some pictures. When I saw, the 12-year-old girl drew this. When I saw this, on the inside, I'm doing cartwheels. Yes, 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 yes. Look how she was able to separate the disease from the people that she loves. And look at how big the disease is. Isn't it fascinating? Children will draw the disease when they draw it. Huge, huge, because of the power, the fury. Look at it. Look at the teeth. Look at the nails. And as the girl described it, you know, alcohol had a steel band around her wrist, and addiction had a steel band around her wrist. And there it had mom, it had sister, it had dad. This is what addiction has done. It's taken away the people that I love. And then the tears started streaming down her face. And she looked at just a brilliant counselor, Carol, who is now retired, one of my favorite co-facilitators. And she looked at Carol and said, "Am I next?" Addiction grabs everybody in my family. Am I next? And Carol looked at her and said, "Not necessarily. Not necessarily." We'll get more into that. Next slide, Zach. How has addiction hurt our family? So look at this. Done by an 11-year-old boy. Here's a picture of the family in all of this. And you add a family, happy and healthy, plus addiction, and look what happens. The family tears apart. It's broken. You know, it's been my experience through the years that people that have means, and this was a family with significant financial means. And then when you have a substance use disorder and you have money, sometimes that allows the disease to continue to progress because you pay your way out of things all the time. You pay your way out of the consequences. But I tell you, without going into any more detail, things got so crazy in this family, and mom and dad both got so wrapped up in that insidious disease that picture at the bottom is when Children's Protective Services came to the house to take the kids away because they simply weren't being taken care of. And everybody was crying. Addiction can tear families apart. Next slide. Sometimes boys and girls get hurt more by what doesn't happen in families than by what does. So Gloria is 9 years old, and I know this isn't in the best focus. I've been looking for the original picture, but there's one little tear coming from Gloria's eyes. And so Gloria lives in a family. Her parents are divorced. She spends every other weekend, Friday night, all day Saturday till Sunday afternoon with her dad. And she showed this picture to the group. And she very proudly told everybody, when I go to my dad's house, this is what I make for breakfast. And this is what I make for lunch. Very proud of, you know, she's taking care of herself. She's 9 years old. And finally, I looked at her and said, "Well, when do you go to bed?" And she goes, "Oh, no, Jerry, I sleep in the chair." And here's her dad and Gloria's mom had no idea the extent of any of this. And Gloria's dad is addicted to methamphetamine, and often he's been up 72, 96 hours. And let's remember Newton's third law of physics. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. So there was a lot of times Gloria would go and spend the time with dad. He'd be asleep most of the weekend. And she told me, sometimes I get up and I walk over to dad. I sleep in the chair. Sometimes I get up and I walk over to dad and I put my chin right next to his mouth to make sure my dad is breathing. Oh, oh. And we would tell boys and girls every day, what you say here stays here unless you are being harmed in some way or in danger of harming someone else. Tell that to kids every day. Yeah, and yet kids will still tell us. And, the end of the day, Gloria came to me and she figured it out. She's a smart, bright little girl. She came to me and said, you're going to tell my mom, aren't you? Oh, yeah, I got to tell your mom what's going on. And she looked at me and she started crying and she says, I hate you. I hate this place. I'm never coming back here. I'm never coming back here. And I go, okay, yeah, I understand you're being angry. And it's okay to be angry. But I need to tell your mom because this is not safe. And I want you to know that Children's Protective Services got involved. And two, they are often one of our biggest referral sources because they come across cases and don't necessarily have a lot of resources for kids that are free. And I want you to know that what eventually happened was, dad got help. And on January 3rd every year, it happened last month. On January 3rd every year, I get a call from that dad who is now in recovery. In recovery. But it started with a child. It started with a child. Next slide. How has addiction hurt our family? Kids hurt too. Mom, dad, stop fighting. And look at that. Yeah, look at that girl right in the middle. Do you know that in the last 60 years, there have only ever been 3 research studies done in North America? And I say North America because the first one was done in 1969 in Toronto, Canada, at the Addiction Research Center. It's only 3 studies done in different decades by different researchers at different universities who actually asked the experts. Who were the experts? The children and the teenagers. What hurts the most? All came to the same conclusion. What hurts the most isn't necessarily the drinking or the drugging or the mental health issues going on. What hurts is the fighting, the conflict, is watching the people you love hurt each other with words and with a whole variety of actions. That's how addiction has hurt her family. Next slide, just a few more. How has addiction hurt our family? 2 little girls living in a home with mom and dad. It's 4 o'clock in the afternoon. They've come home from school. And mom is on the other side of that door. Mom has an addiction to alcohol and to benzodiazepines, prescription drugs. And there are many times they cannot wake her up. They knock, they cry, they bleed. And the 12-year-old takes care of her younger sister, but just petrified. And when she shared this picture, now I waited and spent time with her later. Why don't you call dad and get some help? She goes, Jerry, you don't understand. When I call dad, dad comes home, he gets angry. He yells at mom, he threatens divorce. And when we finally had all of them in the children's program, which there is an adult component to it, dad began to be able to have some insight that he needs to respond to this in a different way. So the terror that takes place sometimes. Next slide. Here's an example, and I'll tell you, kids tell me all the time that the worst time during the week is going home from school because you never know what it is you might find. the unpredictability, the inconsistency, where sometimes things seem okay for a while, and other times it's like things are going off the rail. Here's a child who had previously been in our children's program and comes home, and there's dad, unconscious, unresponsive on the driveway. What did that little kid immediately do? He called 911 immediately. And what you see is dad, after being given a couple of doses of Narcan, a couple of squirts of Narcan, rising up as sometimes people do in all of this. So little boy was able to help his dad significantly that day because he had a plan. He had a plan of action, which kids so often need. Next slide. How has addiction hurt our family? So two slides. When my mom is clean, she is very pretty and sweet. Next slide. When my mom is on drugs, say mom. When my mom is on drugs, she is very thin and has rings under her eyes. It's scary. You know how this 10-year-old girl ended up in the children's program? She was referred by her 5th grade teacher who had talked to grandma, who she was with so much of the time, that 10-year-old couldn't stay awake at school. You imagine? Would fall asleep after lunch with her head on her desk, and other kids would laugh and stuff and try to wake her up. The reason she couldn't stay awake is that she would get up 4 or 5 times in the night when she was with her mom, living just with mom, when she wasn't at grandma's. When she was with mom, she'd get up in the night and look around the house for her mom. Where is mom? What is she doing? Mom, methamphetamine addiction, late stage, where sometimes people feel like they've got bugs underneath their skin and clawing. And there were times incredible 10-year-old would put socks on her mom's hands with rubber bands so mom couldn't do that. Next slide. This slide actually was on the NBC Nightly News a few years ago. This was done by a really gifted storyteller kid, 12 years old. So it starts, as you're looking at it, starts on the left-hand side in the middle. So dad, who had been in recovery a number of years, he's recovering, gets hurt in a work-related accident and starts taking pain medication, but he's taking too much, and he didn't tell the doctor, hey, I am in recovery. We got to be careful with all of this stuff. So he's taking the pain medication, and he's taking too much. Look at all the pills on the table. Mom, who is also in recovery, confronts dad. And you see at the bottom, dad slugs mom. Dad hits her. The kids witness this. Mom calls every doctor she can find who has been prescribing her husband, opiates, pain medication. Let's knock this off, stop this. So dad, as very many people do, transfers to using heroin. And as you go across the bottom, there's dad, with a bag of heroin. But there's the police, and they come and they arrest him, not only for possession, but for dealing drugs. And then dad goes straight up on the right-hand side, and dad is in jail now. And then dad gets out of jail, and the little boy says, never again, he promised. But they go through this cycle. I know so many of you with me today know all about ACEs, adverse childhood experiences that kids have, a real trauma. Look at the number of ACEs here. We see dad is in active addiction, domestic violence, incarcerated, dealing with mental health issues, the challenges that kids face. Next slide. And the last one, and we'll move on, but I will never, ever do a presentation and not show this slide. So here is a little girl, as she described it. It's Friday night, and look at her mom. You are too much. I am leaving. I am leaving. And that little girl's going to be home alone. And my goodness, does that little girl need a program or what? Because she's left thinking there's something wrong with her, or that she made all of this happen. And we need to explain to her that her mom has a substance use disorder where she's in so much pain, she needs to go out and drink and use drugs to make that pain go away. And for someone to not explain to that little girl that it's not her fault. And so you can see some of the challenges. Let's keep rocking and rolling. So addiction. And I'll tell you, with kids, I use the word addiction. Substance use disorder to me is not an age appropriate word. But addiction is a family disease that impacts every single person in the family. And it pains me to tell you in 2024, it pains me to tell you that to this day, children are the first hurt and they're the last helped. And that's why I have such comfort in knowing that the Illinois Family Resource Center, they're working with kids, they're working with teenagers, because we need to fight this disease from every possible angle in all of this. And next slide, Zach. And what we're seeing is the multi-generational cycle. And you know this, but I'm here to tell you that it's not just the substance use disorder that gets passed along generationally. It's the trauma that gets passed along. It's the mental health disorders that get passed along. It's the child maltreatment that gets passed along. All of this gets passed along. And where does it stop? In our program. And now there's evidence. There's a research study came out last year that's the evidence for this. But in our program, what we find is 75%, 3 out of 4, 75% of the adults who would bring their kids to this children's program operated, on average 1 time a week throughout the year. 75% of the adults also grew up in a family with addiction. And the only difference between the kids and the grown-ups were yesterday's children that no one helped. How much longer with all of this? How much longer? Next slide. What the science tells us is that children and adolescents growing up in families with substance use disorder are at risk for a variety of emotional, behavioral, physical, and psychological problems as they grow and develop. I just want to focus on 3 of those this morning: addiction, child abuse, and mental health. Next slide. So what we know is these boys and girls are the #1 group at risk for growing up and developing a substance use disorder of their own. We can't put together another population of kids that are more at risk. Do genetics play a part? Absolutely, they play a part. Now, addiction tends to run in families. There is a biological predisposition. It's in the genes, the slacks, the shorts, the skirt, whatever it is you're wearing. It is in there. It is in there. But let's be clear about one thing. What kids inherit is not addiction. I have a fit, when I was in children's program and having parents or grandparents say, well, he's going to get it. We don't know that. Let's empower that kid with as many skills and tools, and maybe they'll also learn from your recovery. What kids inherit is not addiction. What they inherit is the biological vulnerability to it. But it's more than just genetics. Environment also plays a real key part in this. And let me tell you a story, and then we'll move right around. So we're doing a children's program, and in walk 3 kids. And you know what I try to do? That first morning, chairs in a circle, I just want to sit there and watch everybody come in and watch families come in. Man, there's such a rich amount of information to get. I don't want to be running around getting stuff ready. I just want to watch. So here comes a family, 7-year-old, 9-year-old, 12-year-old. And that first hour, all we do is play. You get there, all we're going to do is play. Do a number of things, but we just want to build relationships. We want to slowly break the ice and see that what we say is really what we do, and just set a tone. And so an hour into the program, we're going around the group. And I'm often asked in interviews, would you put kids in the same family in the same group? And for me anyway, my thinking about it, absolutely. They went through the disease together. Let them go through recovery together. I think the one time I might not want him to be in the same group is if one of the kids during the program is taking care of the other brothers and sisters, getting the markers and making sure that the juice is open correctly and doing all of that, because I would rather that child be in a group without their siblings so they can just be a kid. So it's fascinating. They're sitting in different places in the circle. And so what we're going to do now, we're going to go around and first name and how old you are, and where are you from, and maybe somebody in your family has a problem with alcohol or drugs. So the 12-year-old classic. 12-year-old says, yeah, this is my name. And like I'm 12. And why am I here? Because my mom said if I come here for 4 days, I get a new video game. So that was his motivation. And I'm thinking, oh, great, video games. Like, what are you playing? And after I let that out of my mouth, after I let that question out of my mouth, I'm thinking, don't say Grand Theft Auto. Don't say Grand Theft Auto. Please don't say Grand Theft Auto. And he's, and so, yeah, okay, all right, we'll roll with you. We'll roll with you. We'll see what we can do. Going around the circle. 9-year-old, beautiful little girl, sitting next to Counselor Carol. But she talked just like this. You could barely hear her voice. And the most fascinating thing over the next 4 days is her voice kept getting stronger. And we need to help children find their voice and find safe people where it's okay to share that voice. She says, here's my name. Here's how old I am. And sometimes my mom and dad fight a lot and I get scared. And here's this little girl putting both of her arms around Carol and burying her face in Carol's ribs. We didn't know her an hour before. And we're going around the group and we get to the end. And if I've learned one thing through all these years, is that the younger we are, the closer we are to the truth. And if kids feel okay, they'll just, the younger kids are going to throw it out there. So here's Jeffrey, who I just fell in love with, and he's sitting on the edge of his seat. And he let me call him Jeffy. I go, okay, Jeffy, and he's sitting, waiting. He's last, just waiting for the nod, waiting to say, go ahead. And as soon as you did it, it's like the dam burst. And he goes, let me tell you what happens in our family. And there's a part of me that takes a quick look at 12-year-old brother who's kind of like this. And I was like, no. Don't go there. Don't go there. Leave it at video games. And this little kid says, my dad, sometimes he goes in the bathroom and he's in there for like an hour and he never flushes. So you get all this laughter, going on in the group. But he goes on and he says, my dad's in there and I smell smoke. There's smoke in the bathroom. So what am I telling myself? That's smoking drugs in the bathroom. He's smoking some drugs in the bathroom. And I don't know who told this to this little kid. I don't know if he figured it out on his own. Listen what he says next. He goes, then the door opens and an alien comes out in my dad's body. It's an alien. He hits my mom. Mom's on the floor. My brother, now take a look at 12-year-old. His face is covered. Because here's the truth. My brother, sometimes he tries to go get help. My aunt lives down the street, but sometimes dad grabs him. And my sister, who is now holding on even tighter to Carol, my sister goes in her room and she goes under the bed and I go in the closet. And then he stops. Big, long sigh. And then another one. And he looks at me. And even though I got a name tag on, it says Jerry, he says, Mister, hey, mister, you think you can help me? You think you can help our family? And so the point I want to make, it's not only a biological vulnerability, but it's psychological hurt and pain. It's trauma that combine, that put so many people at risk when they're children. And if they don't have a program as children, and if they don't have a program when they're teenagers, very often we see some of those people in treatment centers needing to begin to deal with all the trauma that's built up in their lives. Next slide. I'll just briefly talk about a study called No Safe Haven. This was a study done, it came out in the year 2000. And you might say, what are you doing with something so long ago? There's a couple reasons, but this study was created. It was done at Columbia University. It was created because they were trying to figure out why the number of reported child abuse cases doubled over the course of 7 years. And so they ask frontline people, they ask judges, they ask child welfare workers, children's protective services, law enforcement, prevention folks. And what the study found was that kids growing up in homes with substance use disorder are almost 3 times more likely to be physically abused. They're almost 3 times more likely to be sexually abused than kids growing up in families where substance use disorder isn't present. But they're over 4 times more likely to be neglected. And I just want to stop and just say something. In being in this spot of semi-retirement, the gift is time to really think about things and tie things together. And I tell you, we don't talk enough about neglect. And please don't get me wrong, all of this stuff is awful for kids. But the amount of neglect that takes place. And I'll never forget, the 11-year-old girl telling me that she had a school project due, but nobody helped her. And she brought it in and feeling so ashamed and embarrassed because it was obvious that all the other kids had all of this help. And I think sometimes we neglect the impact that neglect has on people. The state of South Carolina, I believe the year was 1996, and child advocacy in South Carolina did a 1-year project. They worked with the University of South Carolina. They brought me in a little bit as a consultant, but they've got one of the biggest marketing advertising companies in New York, Madison Avenue, give them a week pro bono. And so they came and descended and watched all they do and came up with this tag. Some of you who've been around for a while will remember it. So the tag that they had: alcohol abuse, ... drug abuse, ... child abuse. One thing often leads to another. Anybody that works in child welfare, children's protective services, law enforcement, whenever we see child maltreatment, we need to ask ourselves the question, is substance use disorder present in that family as well? And in every case where we know it's about substance use disorder, we need to rule out whether child maltreatment is there too. So important to do that. And so lastly, this next slide. Mental health, and I noticed that one or two of folks are here today from NAMI, and what great work that you do, and mental health issues that these kids have, and quite frankly, and it could be a whole other workshop to do, and especially exacerbated by the pandemic. But our young people and our children are in a mental health crisis these days. So these boys and girls, increased risk for anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress disorder. Again, think about all the trauma that we saw in those pictures. So have to rule out what's going on with kids. And often they'll go through our program and then we refer and they get ongoing care. Really important. Next slide. No Safe Haven study ended this way. They being kids growing up in families with substance use disorder, they are the most vulnerable and endangered individuals in America. That was the year 2000. So what's happened since that time? Well, I know we've had a resurgence of methamphetamine, especially in rural areas, including rural areas in Illinois. Last month, I spent some time in a rural area. And some people tell me, Jerry Mo, it's not a resurgence. It's always been there. We've just taken our eye off it. Methamphetamine is huge. What's happened since 2000? How about the opiate, heroin, fentanyl, now xylazine epidemic? Oh my God, tearing families apart. How about the legalization of marijuana? What a great idea that was. And the number of people now going to treatment for cannabis use disorder, whose mental health issues were exacerbated so much. And so think of all the other challenges that have come up since this study and how it really fits. So next slide. No, I wasn't leaving you. I wasn't leaving you. I just needed to pick up my phone that fell on the floor. So if we have a coin, and on one side of the coin, it says kids at risk. And I got to tell you, I hate that term. The only term I hate more than kids at risk is when we call kids at-risk kids. Because sometimes we get afraid of them or we have lower expectations of what they can do. But if we have a coin and on one side it says at risk, I ask you today to flip that coin over to the other side. These are children of promise. Great, great promise. If they're given age-appropriate information, if they're able to skill build, if they feel that sense of belonging, if we help the grown-ups in their family begin to heal. I'm here to tell you that prevention works and early intervention works and treatment works and recovery works as long as it is a process. Sometimes we want to look at this as an event. Oh, we've done our prevention thing for the year. We've had the speaker come in. No, this is an ongoing kind of thing. They'd be leaving treatment today for co-occurring disorder with addiction and depression. And if I don't go out there and keep working on this, good luck of being able to stay in those places. These are kids of promise. This is how I want to look at them. Next slide. I am amazed at how so many of the boys and girls I work with, adversity, hardship, challenges, difficulties, I'm in awe that they just make it to school on a daily basis with all the stuff they face and all the stuff they carry inside. Um, I have a simple mind. That's why working with kids is right where I belong. The definition I like to use for resilience, successful adaptation despite the risk. We've been talking about risks, that despite all those challenges, despite all those difficulties, you know what? They keep getting knocked down. They keep getting back up. They keep getting knocked down. They keep getting back up. They keep getting back up. And to me, the key is drawing upon inner strengths, skills, and supports to prevent adversity from derailing one's life. And please remember those 3 S's. Every time I am done with a day with kids of any age, I want to go back and ask myself, how well did we do today? Did we help point out their strengths? Did I hold up a mirror to help kids see the beauty and goodness they have inside? Do I point that out? Do I catch them when they're doing good stuff and say, wow, what a leader you are? Oh, your kindness, the way that you protect kids younger than you, your laughter, your sense of humor. My goodness, the way that you run when we play capture the flag, the way that you write. I want to point those things out. Skills, and teach living skills, help kids be able to identify and express feelings, how to let those things out. We'll talk more about it in just a minute. How to develop some problem-solving skills, how to create a safety plan, how to have coping strategies and self-care tools and ways to stay safe. And thirdly, support. Who are the safe people? I call them safe people. Who are the safe people in their lives that truly make a difference? Kids don't develop resilience by themselves. They develop it vis-a-vis relationships with other people. And if we want to see resilient kids in America, we better have resilient adults who teach them how to do that, who model that, who make it safe. So next slide, let's get into some healing strategies. So I want to share 4 of them with you. Here's where we're going. I want to go through four really important areas to focus with kids and with teens growing up in families hurt by addiction. And then I want to give you a few resources because, gosh, we can never have enough of those resources. So let's just, that's where we're going. And it's interesting, and I'm laughing at myself right now because it's like I'm in group. We do the same thing with kids. Here's what we're going to do next. And when that's done, then we're going to do this. And that sense of consistency and structure is key. So how do I have that consistency and that structure and yet enough flexibility in case what I'm doing isn't hitting the mark? I've got a backup plan. So learning about addiction. When children experience trauma in their lives, and nobody explains it to them in an age-appropriate way, kids make up a story for it all to make sense. So boys and girls in families with addiction, if no one explains it to them, they make up a story. Through all of my years, through over 4 decades, just like you, I'm right next to you, Nancy. I see three things that happen. Number one, the story they make up is egocentric. They make it up about themselves. Why? Developmentally, young kids see themselves as being the hub of the universe. And even though it's the person I love with a substance use disorder, you know what the story is? Story's about me. It's my fault. I did something wrong. I keep messing up. I stress out my parents, and I can't make it better. I've tried and I can't make it better. Second thing about the story, it's erroneous. But when you have a family that's passed this down with mental health issues, generationally, no one in the family necessarily has the truth about what addiction is. But thirdly, what I see with adults, and again, my origins, my whole career has been based in treatment, doing prevention in a treatment setting, actually doing a child-centered family program in a treatment setting. That's really what it is. But, what happens is the story they make up as kids becomes a life script that really thwarts their growth and development. What do I hear? I'm damaged. I'm broken. I'm no good. I don't deserve to get better. I am worthless. And people saying, what is wrong with me? That inward hate, that anger, what is wrong with me? And being able to say, well, I think there's a more important question. What happened to you? And so what we're talking about doing here is changing the narrative, helping kids to see it's not your fault. You're not to blame. The boys and girls and teens don't make the people they love drink and use drugs. And unfortunately, they can't make them better. And it's certainly not for a lack of trying. Simply can't do that. You can't do it. I got a call on December 23rd some years ago. It was from a grandfather. But when I picked up the call early, 6:30 in the morning, I just got into the office because things are crazy around holidays anyway, when you've got addiction going on in your family. And he heard my voice and he must have cried for at least 2 minutes. And I just kept saying, catch your voice, it's okay. So he and his wife had brought their two beautiful granddaughters. They went through the children's program twice. The girls did. They went through the children's program when their father had OD'd and died. And then they came through the children's program again when mom was missing and no one knew where she was. And they kept bringing the kids to what we call kids night. It's continuing care, and it's like anything else. When programs are over, what then? But if we're not reinforcing the messages, if kids don't get a practice don't get a chance to practice the life skills they're learning, or have that sense of connection to others going through the same thing, they'll begin to lose those skills. So grandma and grandpa are driving an hour each way, bringing them to our continuing care for kids. And what he had told me was, it happened last night. My daughter, she died of a drug overdose, heroin, fentanyl. And he says the girls, it's pretty rough right now, and they really need to see you. And he taught me a really important lesson, because I'm thinking, okay, all right, would you like me to come to you? And he said, absolutely not. They want to go to group room 2. That's their safe place. How many times have been there unpacking stuff? And so they came in. And what do you do in a situation like this? You listen and you validate. And I ask questions about the good stuff about their mom, and happy times, and before she got trapped, and all that. And they had those stories to tell. And it's real important that we tell those stories. So when it was time to go, the 9-year-old looks at me and says, you promised me something a long time ago. And I go, okay, I probably did. What is it? And she says, you promised that if I ever needed something, you would help. I said, I did. She says, well, I'm going to need you and Megan to come next week when I have to say goodbye to my mom.
And the 9-year-old looks at me and says, Grandma and Grandpa, who are standing right there, Grandma and Grandpa, they're going to be crying a lot because my mom's their little girl. So go to this memorial service. About 200 people, and they had a beautiful, big blown up picture of their mom, and they looked just like their mom. I'd never met their mom. The time of me knowing the girls, we don't know where mom was. Beautiful. And 4 people spoke, but no one spoke about the elephant in the living room. And we thought it was over, and the 12-year-old gets up from the first row and goes up and stands next to Grandpa and says, Grandpa, I got to say a couple things. And I'm thinking, oh, boy, where is this going? She thanks everybody for being there. And I'm going to try to do this as verbatim as I can. She thanked everybody for being there. And then she said, you need to know something about my mom. She got trapped by addiction. And you could hear gasps in the church. You could hear gasps. My mom got trapped by addiction. My mom, I love her. She's not a bad person. But when addiction had her, sometimes she did bad things. I'm going to remember all the good things about my mom and all the times I had with her. I hope you do that too. And it's like, whoa, man, you imagine? And what struck me, just the power of the words that she said, or the result of all the investment that Grandma and Grandpa brought in having her continue to be in the children's program, which is so important. But upon thinking about it later, it was the way that she said it. No guilt, no shame, no embarrassment. This is what happened. And if you think about it, there's a lot of stigma today toward people with a substance use disorder. There's also a lot of stigma today for the family members and the children growing up in these families. And I think the best way to kick stigma in the butt is for people to tell their stories. And the power of those stories, truly what makes the biggest difference. So next slide. How do we know we're getting better? So what we do in Continue, how do we know we're getting better? This is done by a 14, 15-year-old girl who had gone through the children's program, and we have in teen groups because they want to stay with us. And look what she drew. Recovery. You have to earn it. Absolutely no codependency in this picture. You have to earn it. And look at the picture. We did not allow alcohol, drugs, nicotine. That's called boundaries, folks. Look at the boundaries she's setting right there. Look at all in the waste management, throwing all that stuff away. But the key to the picture was the key. The key to the picture is the key. Geez, Jerry, come on. The key is the key. And I said to her, whose key is that? And she goes, that's my dad's key. I said, well, you're going to hand it to him? And she looked at me and said, Jerry, that's my dad's key. I said, well, are you going to tell him about it? Jerry, that's my dad's key. We're on the other side of that door. And we're going to keep living our lives. And maybe someday, Dad's going to find that key. And he's going to open that door. And he's going to join all of us. We just can't wait anymore. Next picture. Family laws of addiction. Dr. Claudia Black, a true pioneer in working with kids, in working with families. Don't talk, don't trust, and don't feel. Don't talk, so that then substance use disorder becomes the secret that everybody knows. Don't trust, and often kids learn not to trust their family members who are in their own crisis, and sometimes they generalize that to all adults. So we have to work to gain that trust and build that relationship. And don't feel your feelings. Deny them, minimize them, button them up, medicate them. Don't talk, don't trust, don't feel. So next slide. Next thing we work on with kids is opening doors. Let's remember that this is a disease of isolation, silence, secrecy, shame, and stigma. And so opening doors to our minds, opening doors to our heart, opening doors to our spirit, cracking that door open just a little bit, let some light into the room, create a space for safe people to help, open the window just a crack, get some fresh air. And so opening doors, breaking those family laws, talking, trusting, and feeling. And that's the most amazing thing of all. Kids learn survival behaviors. Don't talk, don't trust, don't feel. What am I asking them to do? Talk to me, trust me, tell me how you're feeling. The exact opposite. And they do it. If you build those relationships, getting out all the stuff they have inside. With kids in group, it's some feeling faces on the wall. No, don't get that poster with 64 feeling faces that say, how are you feeling right now? Just basic feeling phases, maybe 8, 10. Create a safe place in group. And listen with your heart. And kids open up in so many different ways. You saw the artwork. So artwork is a way that some kids open up. Other kids, they write. It's their writing that allows them to open up. Other kids just talk. Other kids, it's through doing experiential role plays. And so trying and again, making the program fit kids and stop making kids fit program. I need to figure out what's the way that you best do that and help you and giving kids validation. I mean, I was asked one time by Time Magazine, what is the moment in when you're working with kids, what's the moment that most touches your heart? And it's this. It's usually the second day. And kids come in, and they know each other a little bit, and they know us. And they start comparing notes. So you thought it was your fault too? You get scared when the weekend comes? You feel hurt a lot, but you just don't say anything because it's only going to create more problems. You get angry too, and then you get in trouble for being angry. and it's seeing that I'm not alone. And it's validating. Yes, you have every right to be confused about this. I get it when you're upset. And yes, it's okay to get angry, but let's teach you some ways to get angry without hurting yourself, hurting another person, or destroying property. Let's work on some of those things. And so there was a boy, he was 10 years old. His name is Oscar. He let me call him Oski. And give kids nicknames. It's silly, it's fun. And if they don't want them, guess what? They're the boss. They get to choose. Well, Oski came to the children's program with his foster mom. And I got to tell you, we'll talk about Sesame Street in a few minutes. We're doing good for time. And do you know what Sesame Street calls foster parents? For now parents. This is the brilliance of Sesame Street. That's my for now parents, which then allows kids to be able to care about their foster parents while they also care about their parents, their birth parents, if you will. And so Oski's dad was in prison, uh, alcohol and drug related. He's been out of his life since he was really little. Oski's mom had gone through a treatment court program, through the criminal justice system, and then she went AWOL. She was missing. There was a period of time where Oski and her mom were, and Oski and his mom were on the streets for 6 months and going from place to place. Can you imagine, missed 6 months of school. They were on the run. And grandma was just praying that somehow we could come back. And then mom was arrested, and Oski is in foster care. So he's sitting across from his foster mom, third day of the program. Parents participate the last 2 days, and he'd written a story. This is what addiction has done to my family. Again, talk about the disease. And he didn't want to read it. I said, you don't have to read it. Sure, you get to decide. How about we just talk to your foster mom? Is there anything you want to tell her? Because he wrote about her, he says. And it's the power of this. He says, thank you for taking care of me. She's welling up with tears. He's saying, thank you for all of the food. It tastes so good, and there's so much of it. Thinking about when he was on the streets with his mom, where some of that just wasn't around. Thank you for a bed to sleep in. Thank you for helping me with my schoolwork, because this kid is one of the smartest people I've ever met in my entire life, but he needed to catch up. Incredibly bright. And he said a few more things. I said, is there anything you need? I'm going to wrap this up. Anything you want to tell foster mom that you need? And he looks at her and says, could I have a nightlight? And she kind of looked puzzled. And I said, better tell her why you want a nightlight. And he said, right before I go to sleep at night, when I put my head on my pillow, the last thing I think about is my mom. Where is she right now? Are bad people hurting her? Is she using drugs? Is she in jail? Is my mom going to die? Will I ever get to see her again? And they hug, and for a few minutes, she just held him. Stuff pouring out. And she looked at him and said, absolutely, on the way home, we're going to go get you that nightlight. But hey, Oscar, anytime that you feel scared or you feel sad, I don't care what time of the day or night it is, you just come and get me. And we're going to talk about it. We'll carve out some time every day, whether we need it or not, where we can share like this, like what we're doing here today. That's getting that stuff out. We can do that if we find the right place and a safe place and competent therapists. Do that when you're a kid or a teen, or so many people have to wait till they're adults to do all of that. So next slide. How do we know if we're getting better? And so here is a picture. There's grandma and mom. There's Rosa. There's Marisol. How do we know this family's getting better? Nice words. Everybody's saying nice words. No more yelling, no more screaming, no more calling people names. And you notice? Everybody's got a smile on their face. Do they have challenges? Yep. Is there adversity and hardship? You know it. But now they've got a place to go with some skills and some tools to build on. Next slide. How do we know when we're getting better? Well, how I feel now with an emotion bag and holding on to happy and joyful and letting go of some of the garbage of working through feelings, identifying them, naming them, sharing about them, and moving on from them. So being able to learn about this disease and then to be able to talk about it, to work through some of these things. So let's keep going. The third area I want to focus on is self-care. Teaching kids, and in the grown-up program, also teaching adults how to take really good care of themselves. Body, mind, feelings, spirit, and kid. Body, how do I take care of my body? What about some good things for my mind? How about dealing with my feelings? And how about the spirit, that sense of how we're connected with one another? You know, that sense of belonging, music and dance and nature, and a belief in a power greater than ourselves for a lot of people, and how to be a kid, and a safe people map. So how do I really come up with a safety plan? You know, through the years, a lot of kids through the program had to go back to many really difficult scenarios. And again, sometimes having to go with a parent who's active in their disease for part of a weekend. But going with a plan, having a plan has made such a huge difference in their lives. And teaching kids how to make a self-care bag, how to make a bag with all these ideas, things I can do for my body and my mind, and my spirit and my feelings, and how to just be a kid. Wouldn't it be great if kids could be kids while they're kids, so they don't want to be kids when they're adults having kids? Oh. He was the most parentified kid I'd ever seen in my entire life. His name was Lawrence. Lawrence was 7 years old, going on 65. I'll quickly tell you this story. The first thing kids do when they come to the children's program, everybody makes a name tag with their first name. It's my job to learn all of your names and to call you by your name or to call you by an appropriate nickname if that's what you like. I look over at him. He's got 6 ripped up name tags, and it looks like he's just about to go off the rails. And I run across the room and I get 2 name tags. Because think about how big our letters were when we were 7. And Lawrence is a whole lot of letters to put on a name tag. So he went double, Lawrence. Lawrence, two name tags. And I look at him and he writes that. And I said, hey, you know, do you ever think about just calling yourself Larry while you're here? And he puts his marker down and looks me up and down and says, perhaps. And he was in a group with little kids who were all really serious. And so you always take the energy in the group, and as the counselor, you try to balance it out. If you got kids that are not serious enough, let's put a little structure and guidance in this. And when kids are very serious, let's make it a little bit fun. Let me tell some dad jokes. Let me be corny. And I'm doing that. And every time I do that, he would say, stop. He would say, knock that off. Don't do that. And at the end of the day, he looked at me and said, what's the name of your supervisor? And it's like, ah. So the next day, Lawrence walks in with grandma. And grandma says to me, can I see you for a minute? And you want to freak me out? Those are the words to use. Can I see you for a minute? Because I'm thinking, oh no, what did I do wrong? Uh-oh, did I do it? Oh, it's a mistake. And then like, I promise I won't do it again. Don't tell my parents, please. Don't tell my parents. And I walk with her and she says, you know, I'm not sure what you're doing in this program. I asked Lawrence 3 times last night, what are you doing? And each time he looked at me and says, Grandma, I can't tell you. It's confidential. But then she softened and she said, but I got to tell you one thing. When I got up this morning, I saw a smile on his face that I haven't seen for a really long time. Jerry, the biggest issue I have with my grandson is getting ready for school every day. It's a power struggle. Can't find his backpack, can't find his homework, can't find his shoes, can't find his jacket. You know, and we yell and we scream and we're always late. And I hate that. I've got to stop that. I know I contribute to it. And then she says, you're not going to believe it. When I got up this morning, there he was, smile on his face. He was fully dressed. His shoes were on and tied. He had his homework from the children's program. He had his towel for swimming. And he looked at me and said, hurry up, Grandma. I don't want to be late. 2 hours before the program took place. And I never hear anybody talk about this. I've never read it in a book. But you know, part of what we always want to do is make sure kids want to come back to the next session. So how do we entice them? How do we help them to see all of that? And there was an example of him doing just that. You know, he went from Larry to Lemonade, and then he became Lemonade Larry, and he loved that term. And it was in the children's program that he finally made friends. And he could finally be a little kid and all of that. And isn't it amazing, when that program was over, Grandma went and did our family program at the Betty Ford Center. And she started setting boundaries and going to Al-Anon. And 6 months later, her daughter asks for help because no one is picking up the pieces for her anymore. And she's dealing with all of the consequences to everything that's going on. And dad gets out of prison and he ends up going to treatment. And my goodness, it all started with a kid. It all started early in my career. People would say, why do you care so much about those kids? You know, let's just help the grownups get better and it'll trickle down. And it's like, you know what? We need to work on this from every possible angle in doing all of this. So next slide. How do we know we're getting better? Hello, Grandpa. You know, having a plan, having that safety plan, not alone, you know, not dealing with something that's going on as an 8-year-old and then beating yourself up for the next 40 years because you didn't handle it better when you're only 8 years old. Next slide. Me and my dad camping. That's how we know we're getting better. And for people in recovery, how do you spell love? How do you spell the word love? T-I-M-E. T-I-M-E. Next slide. The last thing we try to focus on with kids initially is celebration, finding the buried treasure. Again, that beauty and goodness that kids have inside, and catching them when we're doing the good things. And you heard me mention, you know, holding up that mirror and pointing out all the time the beauty and goodness that kids have, even those who still have a loved one in their family who's struggling with a substance use disorder. How do we know that? Let's go to that next slide. My dad is in recovery. Me too. In 2015, I believe it was in October of 2015, there was a huge national recovery rally. It was called Unite for Recovery. It was in Washington, D.C. at the Capitol Mall. A little girl who drew this picture gave permission for placards to be named and handed out to every kid who showed up with their parents that day. Now, it's not just addiction that runs in families. Recovery and healing runs in families too. That's what we got to get after. So next page, Zach. Dr. Emmy Werner. This is a book I'd recommend for you. Dr. Emmy Werner has done a longitudinal study that began in 1955. Some years back, Dr. Werner passed away. That study with those same participants, because all of them were in utero. She's followed them their entire lives. And the last book that she wrote was Journeys from Childhood to Midlife, Risk, Resilience, and Recovery. And what she says, the presence of caring, nurturing adults in a kid's life is a key factor in developing resilience. And I tell people all the time that aren't trained to be therapists, that aren't trained to be counselors, that aren't trained to be peer recovery specialists. You can make a difference in a child's life without ever necessarily even using the word mental health disorders or substance use disorders, just by the kindness and caring and taking interest. And we can all do that. So some resources to give you real quick. Yeah, go to the next one. You had it. You had it. So Sesame Street and Community's Parental Addiction Initiative. If you don't know about this precious little Muppet that was introduced on October the 9th, 2019 on the NBC Nightly News, that is Carly. Carly is 6.5 years old. Carly's mommy is about to come home from treatment. And Carly is excited. Carly is worried. Carly is scared. So this is all part of a dedicated website that's for professionals. It's for recovering parents to learn how to talk to their little ones. And it's also for parents and grandparents and kinship families and foster parents and other caregivers. In the digital storybook, Carly is making 50 jelly sandwiches because when mommy comes home, in case she gets sick again, Carly's going to make sure she's got some food for herself. This digital storybook, in the most sensitive kind of way, prepares kids for a parent coming home from treatment than anything I've ever seen before. Because usually we just don't even say anything except mom's coming home or dad's coming home or your teenage brother is coming home. My connection, next slide. My connection, Sesame Street came to me and said, we found an activity, fun, simple, and engaging, and it's called the 7 C's. And we were told, Jerry, this is your activity. So this is an activity I created over 30 years ago. 7 C's. I didn't cause it. I can't cure it. I can't control it. I learned those 3 things from a 12-step program called Alateen when I was 14 years old. Really helpful. But if you think about it, they just tell kids what they can't do. They tell teens what they can't do. We simply can't just tell kids what they can't do. We also need to guide them in what they can do. But I can help take care of myself. I can communicate my feelings. I can make healthy choices, and I can celebrate myself. So if you go on the website, you can click on any one of those 7 C's, and Carly will explain it to you in an age-appropriate way. You can then color the whole quilt right online, and you can print it, and kids can use it. And Sesame Street said, what's it going to take for you to let us use this in our parental addiction initiative? And it was like, what's it going to take? It's yours. Are you kidding me? What an honor. You'd even call me on the phone. This is yours. This information just needs to be out there. So next slide. The website. So check this out, Sesame Street in Communities /topics/parental addiction, or whatever search engine you use, just Sesame Street parental addiction. And the site will come up. Good news is that there was a meeting that we had in December. We're going to add new resources to all of this. So exciting. And I'll tell you, these are great. These are game changer stuff. Check that out. Next slide. So I am part of the National Association for Children Impacted by Addiction, NACOA, a voice for the children, a not-for-profit advocacy group that doesn't work with children directly, but creates resources for kids and curriculum that Nancy has spoken about, celebrating families, celebrando familias, the children's program kit, really good resources. Remember www. Well, you don't need that no more. Remember NACOA.org, NACOA.org. Let's go to the next page. There you will find tools for kids. Tools for kids. And I want to tell you that about 9 months ago, I completely redid this, and I freshened it up, and I added a great bibliography of books. No, not from the 80s, when Nancy and I were doing this and the village people were ruling the world. No, 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 no. But it's got opportunities for questions and answers, a fact sheet. The 7 C's are in here too. An artwork thing, something about safe people, resources. This is free, and this is downloadable. So could you go back one slide, Zach? So write down NACOA.org, because you see, here's what we're gonna do. I am actually going to give away 3 of these books, and here's what you need to do. You need to go to NACOA.org. You need to find Tools for Kids, very easy to find in the resource section. It's free and downloadable. And I want you to print a hard copy. I want you to have a hard copy of it because it's such a great resource. At the top of the hour, we're going to put Nancy's email in the chat box. And at the top of the hour, I want you to download it, make a hard copy, take a photo of the cover, and then send that to Nancy. And the first 3 people who do, I'm going to send you a book. If I think there's a crayon here somewhere, I'll sign it for you, and we'll and you'll be able to get that book. Lastly, one more slide, and then I got to wrap this up. We're right on time.
Yeah, my email is in the chat. I put it there.
Oh, good. So it's there already. So at the top
Right.
of the hour, because everybody's at a different time. If you want to go for this book, just you know what to do. And here, I want to just talk about Alateen and my favorite Alateen book, Self-Help Program for Teenagers Living with Alcoholism or Other Substance Use Disorders, Courage to Be Me. Why is it my favorite Alateen book of all? Because it's written by teenagers for teenagers. And if you go to that next slide, Teen Corner. So if you go down at the bottom there, you can go online, and Teen Corner, our adolescents can get on and actually be in a meeting online, and there will always be an adult member of Al-Anon who's there to make sure they stay on topic and is there to answer any questions that they might have. So I'm hoping that some of those resources can help. Hey, thank you one more time. Thank you.
Thank you.
For the work that you do. Thank you for making a difference in the lives of children and families. I promise I'll keep you in my prayers. And if there's ever anything I can do to help you, please let me know. Thanks for the time.
Thank you, Jerry.
Thank you so much, Jerry. I will tell you, there is a survey that will come up as we end this, so please fill it out. Zach, let me share my screen right now, and I'll put my email back up there real quick. There we go. We'll leave it up there for just a minute before we sign off. And thank you, everybody. I appreciate you being here, and I just so appreciate Jerry. Let's see if there's anything up in chat before I pop off. Okay. We'll be
Thanks
sending,
everybody for coming.
huh?
I said,
Yeah.
thanks everybody for coming, and thanks Jerry. We really, really, really appreciate you and your presentation.
Thanks for all your help, both of you, and for everybody that's signing off.
And we'll
Never
see you in
underestimate the
June.
difference that you make.
We'll see you in June.
You know it. Be here before we know. My gosh.
Yes, I know. I know. There's one more thing while we're sitting here. I'll just,
One of the questions in the comments, they were asking about CEUs. I will be the one sending those out. I'll get those out by March 1st. If you need it sooner, reach out to Nancy. She can reach out to me and we'll get it sooner. But March 1st will be when we get those sent out.
yeah, I just popped this up here. I'm not going to leave it because I'm going to sign off here in just a minute. But here is a list of the webinars coming up that are part of the Family Resource Center. Number of them in Spanish that Christina will be doing.
Awesome.
And then
So,
someone asked about the surveys. The survey will be on here as soon as you log off and we end the session. So
right. And I'm going to do that now. So watch
Right.
for these. They're coming, and we will see you all soon.
see you guys.
Take
Bye.
care.